A walk with. The second part of a walk around Eriveg and Glen Helen, and we pick up the walk this week as we continue to explore the remains of Eriveg House with Doug Allan.
I think there's a couple of things to mention probably while we're here. It did have a good substantial roof, good tiled roof, and again I think we were guilty, if you like, in taking the roof off in recent times, and a lot of the slates I think were used towards repairing the house out at Aracy. So, you know, they have served a purpose. And just immediately across the track from the house itself, there was an old horse mill which had fell very much into disrepair, and QE2 metal work department or classes took the horse mill at that time, and it was a subject of considerable renovation and work and activity, and it meant the preservation of a mill which again an awful lot of fell into disrepair and have vanished off the scene really.
Yes, that wasn't Sam Knight, was it? Or was it? I seem to recall.
It may well have been Sam, yes, indeed.
It does seem to ring a bell, that. And we've got to, we won't go into the building, I've got to stick a nose in just to take a look. It's probably unsafe inside, but we'll just take a look as far as the porchway here. Looks like the porchway was put on at a later date, because that's in modern brick and the rest of the house is in the old Manx stone.
When you went into the house originally, you were actually faced with a set of stairs that went to the upper story, and then on the right hand side of the doorway was the kitchen, in the kitchen area, and then left hand side obviously a sitting room area and up above bedrooms. It was obviously quite a substantial house, because
absolutely.
You know, you look across the top floor and there's evidence of at least 3 windows in its time, two fireplaces and chimneys, one each end, so one would imagine that it must have been quite a prosperous little spot at one time for a house of this size to have been built here.
So there's the porchway, you see, still standing there. Looks quite solid. And a bit inside here, my word. Look at that. Hey, you've left your pan here still.
Yes, looks like it. Yes, it looks as if this right-hand side end, by the size of the old fireplace area, that was probably would be the likes of a Manx Chalet. That was
a Chalet, that's a good word.
Yes, indeed, the forerunner to the modern day Arga. It did everything, I think. It had ovens and warming ovens, and as well as the ability to suspend a large kettle over an open fire.
But now it's yes, a little bit dilapidated inside. An amazing part of the old timbers.
An amazing home for ferns.
It has, hasn't it? It actually looks quite tropical in a way, because you've got ferns and mosses and lichens all dripping off all the walls. Amazing.
And unfortunately, we've got what was the upstairs floor and the roof rafters now at ground level. But again, rotting away and forming a base which no doubt will be inhabited by all sorts of things in due course.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It'll be a haven for the wildlife. And like I said, Doug's left his pan from his last brew there, you see, when he shut up back in the years gone past. Right, we'll leave it in peace. Go on down.
When I first became forester, which was 1970-71, and appointed as Northern Forester down at Gobbervolley, I would spend probably a couple of half days a week in the office at the most, and the rest of it was very much an outside, hands-on job. Dare I say it, by the time I'd finished, I was lucky if I spent the 2 half days out.
Actually out in the...
The rest of the time seemed to be spent in the offices doing reports and writing various things, health, safety and risk assessments. And it certainly wasn't the job that I'd originally set out to do. But again, I suppose other people setting out now, that's the job as they see it. So how they'll see change in 40 years or so, it seems beyond imagination how things will change. And I think everybody that has worked, I suppose, a lifetime in any job, the last 10, 15, 20 years, the advancement in the gear that you've got, we've gone from a sickle and a scythe to powered weed eaters and strimmers, power saws. Everything was done by hand. All the felling was done during the winter when the sap was down in the trees, and a lot of the extraction was done in the summer, some of it by hand, using what they called a wire horse, and indeed by horses themselves. We certainly during the winter periods would have a tram horse from the corporation, and it went from plantation to plantation with a minder, and on the more difficult sites, that was how we got the timber out. These days, of course, you've got double drum winches and cranes and all sorts of things which obviously do the job more efficiently, not as attractively though.
No, that's often the case. Although I dare say a few people might be surprised to think there were still horses working the plantations this is the 60s.
Yes, indeed in certain areas still horses are used, in the Lake District in particular, where amenity is of high importance, which indeed it is in the Isle of Man. The horse is still considered to be the most attractive proposition.
I suppose relatively low running costs, and yes, they can get into all sorts of places. It might be more difficult to get a larger mechanical vehicle, I guess. So they're still fairly flexible. I was going to say workhorse then, but you can't. That might be a bit of a pun. Okay, just do the stile down there. We're just down by the sign, coming down the other sign saying the Erie Beg Plantation, and back onto the track. We have a lovely new gate put down here in red, going up to another track which is a private property. We're not going that way then?
No, we're not. No, that leads actually up to Airy Moor, which is still a worked farm, in that its basic stock, I think, cattle and things like that run. But just to the left of that there is a new gate which leads into a path which leads into the glen itself. And this was a path that, when we look back on some of the old maps a number of years ago, showed up as being one of the original paths in the glen. And when we came to explore, because it certainly hadn't been used in 50 or 60 years, we found a very substantial path which in itself required very little clearing. And on a winter work scheme, we set about, and at the far end of it constructed a new set of steps down to the Waterfall area up at Renass. But however, again, a bad winter, a lot of trees were blown down, and the path became badly uprooted at that point, and again it fell into disuse. But in the last 12 months or so, the Glen's gangs, along with the aid of the forestry staff, have reopened this path, and it leads for more or less the whole length of the glen on the south side along the top edge of the bank, and gives an extremely attractive walk, and indeed on a path which probably a lot of people don't realise is here.
It's actually there now. Absolutely. And this farm, I dare say a lot of people, it's fairly well secluded. This one too, not something you're going to bump into by mistake.
No, indeed. And the glen itself actually runs back right out towards an area known as Airy Glass, and on the north side is Lamp Fell, and on the south side, the area that we're going to walk out through, was known as Airy Roddy originally. So again, shieldings in all sorts of places, but a path to be experienced.
Sounds good to me. All right, lead on. Wonderful. Always up for a new path, and you can see where the boys have been doing good work here. And as Doug was saying, gate, thank you very much. Gate through here, and new fencing on the right so that you're not trespassing onto the private property, which, as Doug was saying, goes up towards the farm there. So, marvellous.
This area here we just walked into now, it's evident that, particularly running from the path down into the glen itself, there are a number of large beech trees. Now these trees form part of what was the original planting in the 1850s to 1870s by the guy who sort of established the glen in those days, Marsden. So we're looking at trees here that are probably 150 or 160 years old. A lot of them are still in good health, but one or two showing signs of their age. And for people who are interested in fungi and things like this is certainly an area in the autumn where there is quite a variety of different fungi growing.
The place to come. You see, I love looking at my fungi, but I don't claim to be an expert, but this is one path I haven't tried out. So, well, we know where to go this autumn then. Wonderful. And as you say, just going past, we have 150-year-old trees, and then just down here some fresh planting of copper beech, this, isn't it?
Well, no, it'll be ordinary beech, it'll be common beech. It is one of the few trees that is termed to be a shade bearer. So under a canopy of established trees, it's one of the few species that you can actually plant and should survive and grow on to become the second generation.
Oh, it's terrific, a lovely route coming along, and really once you get onto this main path here, it's spectacular. You can look out in front of you here, and yes, you wouldn't believe that it could have been ignored for those years, because it's looks clearly defined, lovely straight route, and good walking underfoot. What more could you ask? And, well, we've been striding out for a few minutes now along that track, virtually straight, as I say, and as Doug was saying, if you are familiar with Glen Helen, which a lot of people probably will be going around the glen itself, what in essence you're doing, you're walking along parallel with that, well, I suppose a right-hand path as you're looking going up the glen, right above the tops of the trees where you normally look up if you're walking down by the river level. And then it goes straight along there. We've just come across a little boardwalk where the chaps have been out. There's a little boggy section in the middle there where they've been kind enough to put out a nice boardwalk to stop people getting too stuck in the mud. And then we're coming towards the back end of the track now. It carries on one way, and there's stairs just going down here. Are we following the track downwards?
We are indeed, and this was the section years ago that got destroyed, storm-wise, trees uprooted and all the rest of it. And I think they've attempted again to do a little bit of restoration work here, and possibly again over the winter. Looks as if it's a little bit wet, but we're either faced with this or a considerably longer walk still continuing out round the top of the glen, out round the tributary known as the Blaber. But if we cut down here, I think we come to a little Keel. Again, something when I first started to work here, didn't even know it existed, and it to the point where it's not actually illustrated on the map at the entrance coming into the glen.
Oh gosh!
So if you look at the entrance, look at the map at the entrance, you won't see it. But indeed, it is more or less directly above, on the south bank, above where the two rivers themselves meet at the Renass Falls. So I think we cut down here and have a little look.
Marvellous.
Probably wet underfoot, I think.
Yes, it looks a bit that way, but we came prepared. So as long as we don't go on our backsides, we'll be fine. Looks a bit squidgy.
See where the water's been coming down here.
Yeah, it's incredible when you come down a bit further down. It's been water streaming down here. You can see the ground ivy and the leaves and channels where water's been cascading down the bank with some of this torrential rain we've been having of late. And you hardly need me to tell you that virtually all the fields and lands are saturated, so that when we have more rain, it just comes straight out again, as you can probably hear. And having negotiated that, here we come up a little mound on the other side, and here's the little keel. And we'll just go inside. Now look at that.
Yes, I think as keels go, it's probably in quite good repair.
It is.
It's virtually round, really, although if you look at the walls, it's more of like a hexagonal design, isn't it?
You're right. Yes, it's not a true circle. It is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, I think you're right. Six hexagonal. Yeah, that's right.
It's a bit like the bridge lower down, in that a plaque with some information on would be nice.
Yes, there's nothing here really to give you any hint of exactly its history, when it was built and what it was here for, but a little keel nonetheless. But not well known.
No. And again, leading from here, you've got two paths. One which leads again back up into the Blaber side of the valley, and the one I think which we will probably take again, which is more of a shortcut back down towards the waterfall itself. Light is beginning to go. So we'll take the path down now towards the bottom of the falls itself.
Lovely. After you. There we go.
This right-hand southern branch, if you like, that follows the Blaber up round to the little bridge at the top and then back on to the Sandwich Hill, and then again you can get back down from that on a very steep path, but back down to the waterfall itself. And again, it's a piece probably a lot of people don't sort of come to, really. They come up to the waterfall, and think that's it, but they really are missing out on what's a really nice loop. And particularly in the springtime when stuff is just coming into leaf, you've got the fresh ferns and the trees, again beech and ash, and to a lesser extent a few oak and a few conifers. But it really is a pretty glen. Very much, I would say, like Ballaglass, with the little tumbling pools and
quite
things
similar,
like
isn't it?
that. Yes.
It is pretty, and the sort of sounds and the looks, it is gorgeous. But you're dead right that very few people really get this far. People go up, cross by the bench at the top end where the waterfall is, and think, well, that's as far as you can go, and go back down again. And you are missing out on a treat, so think about going a bit further one day. And here we are, the aforementioned waterfall. People will know this spot. Now, we often come up here, my wife and I, and our game all the time is looking at a day like today and say, how many gallons a second of water are coming over that?
I don't know, but there's certainly a heck of a lot. Yes, it's certainly a photographer's day today.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes, there's not a great volume, but again, one of the things that's been lost here, there used to be a bridge that went across, or a viewing platform that went across the top of it, about 20 odd foot above the fall itself.
That would have been nice.
And indeed, if you go up onto the top, onto the rock promontory, you can see where the metal supports for the viewing platform itself was leaded into the cliff on the opposite side. And indeed, I photograph old postcards and do slideshows, or used to do slideshows. and a lot of them showed the platform with Victorian ladies and gentlemen standing on them.
That'd be a great place to go, I must admit. We should bring it back.
Yes. Well, I think again 20 odd years ago there was, it was initially talked about, but it just wasn't progressed. And I suppose again, in view of the present economic climate, it's probably highly unlikely, I'm afraid.
Yes, I'm afraid that's probably very true. Very true.
But again, the waterfall itself certainly is. It looks very natural without any additional sort of man-made objects attached to it.
Yes, you get the impression it's been there forever, cascading down. And as you say, sometimes in the summer it can be quite quiet, but today, well, you can hear cascading over. You can almost feel the spray on your face, even though we're standing a good 15-20 yards away. Marvellous. Okay, well, we're now back in terra firma, as it were, or certainly back into the glen, the main section of the glen that everyone is familiar with. Crossing over the stone bridge to go onto the sort of Kirkmichael side bank, as it were. Call it what you will, the right-hand bank as you're going down the pathway which drives you back down towards the Swiss Chalet. And here we go, at the end of the track, pretty much, and at the end of the walk, really.
Yes, this is really probably our last stop, I would say. We stood outside the Swiss Chalet itself. Interesting again in itself that it was part of Marsden's original building constructions within the area. The original building itself burned down in 1983.
That's right, yeah.
Quite a catastrophic fire at the time. But what was quite amazing was that within 12 months was this new wonderful sort of Swiss-style building had been reconstructed on the site, sort of, and I think it fits quite within the character of the glen itself. It's sort of within the area which would certainly 100 years ago have been described as the hub of entertainment, looking out onto the little lawned area, which you say originally had a bandstand at each end. And it's got the Victorian fountain, which is still in working order. That in itself was fed by a little reservoir up on the south bank, which is still in existence, if you can find it alongside the track that leads up to Airy Beg and Airy Moor Farm. And again, it's a centre of activities here, holds its functions obviously for weddings and such like, and lots of people come out onto the lawned area and have their photographs. But I think one of the features that, from my point of view, is of particular interest is some of the trees that are around this area. The sequoia, giant redwoods and thuya, the Amy Johnson tree, and specimens of macrocarpa and Douglas fir, etc. It's really like a mini arboretum in a way.
It is, isn't it? Lovely.
Some of the trees themselves now must be some of the tallest on the island. Measured, about 10, 12 years ago, were in excess of 100 foot then. So at the rate that some of these trees grow at, they must certainly be around about 120 foot, I would think. It's such a nice area, and with interest for everybody that has got an interest in the countryside and nature. The walk that we've done today, it's probably taken us a lot longer than what it would take most people, talking a lot as we went.
Well, chatting away, that's what it's all about.
But a circular lap that probably most people would do in a couple of hours quite comfortably, and you come back feeling suitably refreshed from the Manx nature. And again, it's the sort of place that you could come more or less any day and in all weathers, because it is relatively sheltered all the way, and it really does portray what a Manx Glen is about. And indeed, if you venture up on the other side, as we did initially, onto the forest side, then portrays just what the forestry division is doing from a forestry point of view, which in itself is not unattractive.
A beautiful walk. Just remains to thank Doug very much indeed for his time today. Well, we shall all see you in the next programme. Cheerio.